Hi there. Hello there. Welcome again. This is Clifford Bates, and I'm going to be today wrapping up our discussion of Machiavelli, reading Machiavelli's Prince. Our discussion of Machiavelli's Prince. Uh, Today we're doing the last chapter, chapter 26. Um, Chapter 26 is the end of the Prince in that sense. It's actually very different than the rest of the Prince. This is an exhortation. The style will be completely different. It will have a wholly different style. Yes, it'll be written in Italian, like the rest of the Prince, but the form of, instead of being a device, it's almost like a sermon preaching out, a kind of orgasmic sermon that comes right after the end of chapter 25, where he tells us we should conquer fortune. We should take that word fortune, and what we have is this exhortation, this kind of this release of emotion and release of energy. Now, why some joke this is the chapter is purposefully done. Some argue that this is done to kind of force the emotion of enthusiasm and release on you, and therefore to join in with the conquest of fortune that he did in the other chapter. That you became a participant of taking down fortune, okay, and therefore you're having your release at this moment. Here at this moment, this is kind of a very erotic understanding of what's going on here. That Machiavelli is, and in this act we become a co-conspirator with Machiavelli. Our pleasure we get here in this chapter will be tied to our kind of being a one who does who engages in the crime with Machiavelli in that sense. Again, we're using the Alvarez's translation. The link to the Alvarez's publisher below. Chapter 26 is the ending. It's part of it with the epistle dedicatory are the introduction. The end is the exhortation. The title is the exhortation to lay hold of Italy and to vindicate her liberty from the barbarians. So liberate her from the barbarians. To lay hold, grab Italy, and to vindicate her, make her yours. To vindicate her, rescue her from the barbarians, which are the French and the Spanish. This is the famous This is the idea of liberating Italy. This will make the question is, what do we understand Machiavelli? Is he a mere kind of cynical advocacy of principal power? Is he just a courtier? Is he an advocate of principalities, or is he a defender of republics? Or is he a realist? Or now in this case, is he a nationalist? The 19th century Italian nationalists will look at this. This is kind of like Machiavelli's chapter 26 is very much similar to Fichte's letter to the German people. This kind of national other events in Germany that leads to the national consciousness, the consciousness of a German people. This is the kind of moment of the Italian consciousness. The Italian as a unique people that should be a nation of their own, okay, not simply ruled by different states and different regions. This is in this chapter is presenting Machiavelli. Those who wish to present Machiavelli will have to make heightened use of this chapter and read the rest of the Prince in light of this chapter. In that sense, read it backwards. So therefore, again. Different interpretations of Machiavelli will come on. If you read it from the courtier, you read it from the front, from the epistle dedicatory, you see this as a courtier, as a man trying to win favor with the Medicis, with princes in power. He's a servant to princes, or wishes to be a servant of princes. and is an advocate of princely power. And that here he becomes the liberator. In other words, and then within inside of him, and with his light of his discourse, in his other word, he seems to be the Republican. Who Machiavelli is, different people will always be to different people different things, and Machiavelli wants that to be, because this is maybe in fact a quality he wishes to convey upon a good leader, is to be many things to many people. Being no, in other words, letting them, whoever is looking at you, see you for what they want to see you for, but in the way that benefits you, not in other words, or that in other words, you want them to see you in the light that always benefits you in that sense. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, that's just kind of a background to understand this question, this chapter. This chapter, again, we're using the Halver's translation, so we're on page 151 of it. This chapter, the final chapter, wraps up. It's the epistle dedicatory and this are kind of the frame of the Prince. And as I said, which way you look at the Prince, either from light of many of the 19th century writers and 20th century writers of Machiavelli who want to see him as a nat, will take the point of reference from here. So therefore, this is a very interesting thing. The frame offers you the two ways you can understand, at least two principal ways you want to understand Machiavelli. The rest of the book, as we talked about it as three. It has the principalities of arms, and that the qualities of the prince, and then the question, the prudence and judgment of the prince. The qualities, the principalities, the unprincipatos, the varieties of principalities and their types and varieties. This goes from chapter, starts with the sketch of what's supposed to be done on chapter 1, and it continues to chapter 11 with the ecclesiastical principalities. And then we have the discussion of arms, the 3 chapters would deal with arms. And then from 15 to 19, we get the discussion of the qualities of the prince, the different qualities where he engages in. And then from 20 to 25, we've had the discussion of prudence and judgment. The question of, and the kind of testing of our prudence, the reader's prudence, and the student's prudence, and the ability to judge the secretary. To judge the secretary. Is Machiavelli really, in other words, judge what he says and see if you listen, see if you, and as judge the teacher too, in that sense. Now let us turn now to the thing in itself, the exhortation. Again, it has 7 paragraphs. Again, as we talked about, this is not one of the what is it? I go back to my statistics of the structure of the Prince. 7 paragraphs is actually the 7th. It's the 7th place. Lucky 7-7, right? This is the funny part. It's if you count the epistle dedicatory, then it won't. They will have it will have 5 locations, and if you count the epistle dedicatory, therefore 7 paragraphs and 3 paragraphs will be the peak of things. 5 with 5 entries each. But if you don't count the epistle dedicatory as a chapter, then the 3 paragraphs get reduced to in second place. Second highest number of, in other words, of the number of paragraphs, remember it's 20. The highest is 21, the lowest is 1 paragraph, and there is basically 12 places, 12 places, and that this ending 26. Is the final of the 7 paragraph ones. So it's the highest in that sense. We don't count, if we don't consider the epistle dedicatory equal to a chapter, and it's not a chapter, we don't count them in that way, then it's the most. But if you count the epistle dedicatory, so again, the epistle dedicatory, its relationship, the relationship of this chapter to the epistle dedicatory is even tied into the significance of these sections, this kind of, not significance, but the the pattern here of the text. The text has a very interesting pattern. There's always the patterns of the text that Machiavelli's playing with to help us understand it in this. So if we count the Epistle Dedicatory, this is the chapter. This will be paired with. There'll be 2 peaks, but if you don't, the Epistle Dedicatory place is not considered counted as this. Then the 7s are the highest, the most frequent, and therefore, now what does this have to do with anything? He's saying this doesn't mean anything. Well, it points us to this duality of this, the kind of gameful playfulness of the arrangement, points to why this chapter is important in that sense. This chapter is is part of the frame. Its style is connected. It is connected directly. Its tone and style has a structural relationship to what was done just before. Remember, what was done just before, the last paragraph of chapter 25, was Machiavelli's advice to be impetuous, right? And its advice to go conquering, to slap down fortune and take her, right? And if you take that kind of as literally, what are you doing there? Your fortune. And like the act, with the act, you have as the physical act of that act leads to a release, we get a release, an exhortation, a enthusiastic release here, an enthusiastic release on the part. Now again, as I mentioned, this is the kind of he's implicated you in the raping fortune. You're joining it. You're enjoying it. You've done it. You've done it with him. Now, the exhortation, thus, in this sense, therefore, the artistry, the structural artistry of the text works that way perfectly. This is what you can see. This is where you see the mastery of Machiavelli as an artist in that sense. The interplay of the sections and chapters all work at this together. It comes together in that sense. And that we have this playful, emotional thing here that can, and what it does, and this can overpower us, and therefore we understand it. We understand that we reinterpret the whole from the part. Let's turn to the first paragraph. Having considered then all the things discussed above, and thinking over within myself, presently in Italy, the times were ready to honor a new prince. In other words, I want to honor a new prince. A new prince must come. And if there was matter which could give the occasion for one prudent and virtuous to introduce the form which would give honor to him and good to the general body of her men, it seems to me that so many things are concurring to benefit a new prince, that I do not know whether there ever was a time more proper than this. In other words, in other words, he's saying the situation that Italy's in now is a great occasion. And like those great captains of the past, in chapter, the princes of virtue that was discussed in chapter 4. I want to do it. No. Back to, I'm going to get my thing here, so I'm checking myself. All the way back to chapter, chapter 6. All the way back to chapter 6. Those great captains who had that fortune gives them the occasion. Fortune has given you a prince, someone here at this moment, a greatest occasion to do what? To what he says, that a new prince, if there was the matter which could give occasion for one prudent and virtuous to introduce the form, the structure, right? A form which could give honor to him and do good to the general body of her men, Italy, the people of Italy. It seems to me that so many things are concurring to benefit a new prince that I do not know whether there has ever been a time more proper than this. So now is a time, in that sense, he's saying. As if I have said, now this is the footnote he says here, that Alvarez has a footnote here, in his chapter 6 above, again. He's referring to, it says he's referring to chapter 6 above. One wished to see the virtue of Moses. It was necessary, I was repeating what he said in chapter 6, necessary that the people of Israel be enslaved in Egypt, and to know the greatness of the minds of Cyrus, that the Persian be oppressed by the Medes, and to know the excellence of Theseus, that the Athenians be dispersed. So at present, if one wished to know the virtue of the an Italian spirit, it was necessary that Italy be reduced to her present terms, and that she be more enslaved than the Hebrews, more servile than the Persians, more dispersed than the Athenians, without head, without order, beaten, despoiled, torn asunder, overrun, having borne every sort of ruin. Now notice this. He mentions Moses to begin with, right? And he mentions he talks about all the great captains, I think. No, he doesn't. The one he doesn't mention is Rome. Romulus, right? Romulus, I think he doesn't mention. I think Romulus is the one, right? Let's go back to six, right? Chapter 6, all the way back, and I think it's Theseus. It's Moses, Cyrus, Romulus. He's silent about Romulus. Notice this. He's silent about Romulus. But then what is Romulus is dispersed, but the Athenians, right? He mentions Theseus. He's silent about Romulus. Notice this. That's interesting. And he goes, what is this verse? That he was that the situation now is so bad that they're more enslaved than the Hebrews, more servile than the Persians, and more dispersed than the Athenians, without head, without order, beaten, despoiled, torn asunder, overrun, having borne every sort of ruin. Now, this is a very situation. This is a situation that allows. Next paragraph. And although before this a gleam of light showed itself a certain man, whereby one might have judged that he was ordained by God for her redemption. Yet afterwards one has seen how he was reprobated by fortune at the highest course of his actions. Now again, this is de Alvarez points here, and this is Machiavelli. It's commonly presupposed that he's referring to Cesare Borgia. But de Alvarez suggests it may be depiction of Machiavelli himself. And see Piscatori and also the Discourses of Piscatori, first preface and the second preface. One should also take into account that Machiavelli indicates that Pope Alexander VI, and not Cesare, was the cause of the actions that were ostensibly praised. So it's not. So therefore, who is the person that he's applying? Is it Cesare? Looks like Cesare, but Cesare is not really the real cause. It's Alexander is the cause of Cesare. So is it praising Alexander, but he's condemned? He's criticized Alexander. So is he really praising himself? So who is the prince? Who is the prince that was but fortune, malignity? Remember, but both he. Remember what destroys Cesare, malignity of fortune. But remember the Epistle Dedicatory. It's Machiavelli. Machiavelli and Cesare Borgia both suffer this kind of fortunes, a poverty of fortune. What is that line? Malignity of fortune. Malignity of fortune. So, in other words, he goes, next sentence of this. Thus, left as if without life, in such a mode she awaits whomever will be able to heal her wounds, to put an end to the plunderings of Lombardy, and to the taxation of the kingdom of Naples and Tuscany, curing these her sores, which have already been festering, period. have been long festering. So that it's Spanish and that, the plunderings of Lombardy and the taxation of the kingdom of Naples and Tuscany. The Tuscany, by the, who's taxing them? It's the Spanish and the French. And that these are the sores that have long been festering. He says, right? Look how she prays God. Look how she prays God that He sends someone who might redeem her from these barbarous cruelties and insults. Semicolon. She also see also how she is ready and wholly dispersed to follow a banner, provided there is one who taketh. They're ready for something to be led. They're waiting for someone to come, a redeemer, someone to save. Now, this is also true, but everything he says, Machiavelli says about right now about Italy is also true about Germany at this time too, right? And this is why when Luther comes to rise and spread, Luther is as much as he's a religious phenomenon, is also a social and political phenomenon. It's only that he refuses to become one. Okay? If Luther was not merely just a priest, not just merely a theologian, but really a legislator, a lawgiver in this sense, and embraced the peasant rebellion, embraced this, and was like a new Cyrus, like a new Islam, like a Muhammad, okay? A Muhammad is an example of a prophet with arms, right? It's Muhammad is the prophet with arms, and he will establish his reign over the Catholic, which then first is all of North Africa, and that then separately the Turk became the Ottoman Empire, right? It broke up into two, but after he died and after the successors fought amongst each other, echoing Alexander, right? The same, the kind of situation. In other words, Luther had that possible moment in that sense. Machiavelli is promising someone to do this. That there is an occasion here, and that the Italians are willing to do this, right? And he says what? That anyone who take it. Now, next sentence. In other words, she is ready and wholly disposed to follow a banner, provided there be one who takes up the banner of Italy. Okay. Next paragraph. This is the third paragraph. Nor is there anyone nor is there anyone to be seen at present in whom she can hope more than your illustrious house, the Medicis, which with its fortune, because remember, this is not only the Medici the Prince, but also the Medici Pope at this time, Leo X. With its fortune and virtue, favored by God and the Church, right? In other words, of which it is now the Prince. In other words, he's the Prince of the Church, right? Could make itself the head of this redemption. In other words, this is very interesting in that sense, that the Cardinal Giovanni de' Medici, of Uncle Lorenzo, to whom the Prince is dedicated, is acceded to the papacy in 1513 as Leo X. Okay, so this is and he can be the source of our redemption, right? This redemptive language of recovery. This will not be very difficult, if you, again, the you here, I think, is going to be the courtly second person. No, it's very courtly, very formal in this sense, interestingly. If you call up before you the actions and the lives of those named above, those great captains, right? Again, Galbraith gives the note 5 again, right? This is that, again, pointing to those great captains, right? Written above. And then what does he say? Next sentence. And though these men are rare and marvelous, nevertheless they were men. And, each of them had less occasion than that of the present. Semicolon. For their enterprise was not more just than this, nor easier, comma, nor was God more a friend to them than to you. Wait a minute. Moses, God is more a friend to whoever's going to help them than Moses was God a friend to? I mean, come on. This is, in other words, Moses, Theseus, Athens spread it like this. Moses, that Cyrus, the Persians, right? These great. He mentions these three, and he says that what their enterprise is not more just than this, and liberate, freeing Italy from the barbarians, nor easier. In other words, this is going to easy to do compared to what they did. Okay. Then what? Nor was God more a friend to them than to you. Because the idea is that your brother is the Pope, right? Your uncle's the Pope, and your family is tied to the Pope. So God loves you. This is a great play on this, right? Here is great justice, comma, quote, for just is the war for those whom it is necessary, and the pious, the arms where there are no hope, but in arms, right? This is a quote. And this is a quote from Livy's Histories, Book 9, first paragraph. It's a quotation from Livy. In other words, it is saying what? It's saying that for just is the war for those whom it is necessary, and pious the arms where there's no hope but in arms, right? In other words, this is a great powerful Livy quote about just war. War, you know. Next, here is the greatest of dispositions, semicolon. Nor can there be great difficulty where there is great disposition, comma, provided that one takes, comma, as the target those orders I have proposed. Now, he said, now, the proposed 7. This is chapter 13. Again, the arms, right? Don't use mercenary arms, build your own army. Then he goes, the next. Besides this, comma, there are to be seen extraordinary things, examples conducted by God, colon, the sea is open, semicolon, a cloud has escorted you on the road, comma, the rock has poured out water, comma, and it has rained manna, 8. Everything is concurring with your greatness. Now, 8. This is footnote 8. He has a thing here. References the episode of Exodus, Numbers, when God has the conductors and leads Moses towards the river into the promised land. In other words, again, all these things. What he says that all the signs and symbols, all the signs. In other words, the signs point to this. He says that. In other words, a sea is opened. A cloud has escorted you on the road. The cloud has poured out. The rock has poured water. And it has rained manna, bread. Everything is concurring for your greatness. The rest ought to be done by you. In other words, fortune, God has given you all this occasion to do this. Now you just have to act. In other words, done by you. In other words, the rest ought to be done by you. God, next sentence, God does not want to do everything. It ought, in order not to take away free will from us, and that part of the glory which falls upon us. Now, this is a reverse back to that. In other words, he asserts free will against fortune. Now, God will not do everything for us. God will do a lot for us, but God will still leave it to us that. Because why? To preserve free will. In other words, this is great. He says that, in other words, God has done everything he can. He's done all these signals, all these occasions, and all these things. And then all the signs are there. God has produced all the signs. And that, in other words, the only thing is the rest ought to be done by you, right? Because God does not want to do everything. in order not to take away free will from us and that part of the glory which falls upon us. In other words, the glory that we do these things. The next paragraph, right? He then, and it is nothing to marvel at if not one of the Italians named above has, in other words, earlier, right, named above, have been able to do which one can hope may be done by your illustrious house, semicolon. And if, comma, after so many revolutions in Italy and so much management of war, comma, it always seems that military virtue is extinguished in her, comma, this arises from her ancient orders not having been good. In other words, what her ancient orders are not been good. In other words, the ancient orders, in other words, the military virtues is collapsing all the time. And this is because she did not respect war, his argument. This is, in other words, they remember the Italian orders, the orders of the Italian states, unlike the empire, the Italians who independence from the empire, right, were the burghers, the new free cities, and the church. And neither the burghers nor the free cities were used to having arms and virtue, and they relied on the ones who did, and it became relying on mercenary arms. And their reliance on mercenary arms is what led to the sins of Italy, right? And therefore, this is saying this is what the sins of Italy is their inglorious ancient. In other words, their ancient orders have not been good. What are the ancient orders of Italy? The ancient orders are the orders of arms, which are the concarte, the militias, not the militias, but the mercenary arms, right? As he said earlier, in that sense. And there has since been no one who has known how to discover new ones. And nothing gives such honor to a man newly arising as the new laws and the new orders discovered by him. In other words, the new orders. In other words, whoever's going to come in here is going to have to give new laws. He's going to have to imitate what Charles, the King of France, did when he expelled the English, to create good arms. You need to create good arms. You need to create a people with the same good laws. And one of those good orders is about the militia, about training the militia, training the citizens to be your arm, trusting the people to defend Italy. Okay, this is the point he's trying to say here. And he goes, what? And that new order is discovered by him, right? That this is going to be these things, comma, when they are well founded and have greatness in them, make him revealed and wonderful. In other words, again, this is the idea of the new prince. New prince is going to innovate and do things, but he's going to his ability to do these, get the people, trust them, and innovate them. This is the great captains, how they made their citizens whole and made their subjects, great in that sense. But this is what? This is the means by which that makes them what? These things which, when they are well founded and have greatness in them, make him revered and wonderful. And in Italy, one does not lack matter for inducing every form. In other words, semicolon. There's lots of, in other words, the situation, as he said, that there's lots of matter here. We have the resources, we have the people, we have the things. It can be done. A good order in a good mode. A good order in a good mode will bring out, could produce, can be achieved here. He's saying here, right? In other words, Italy does not lack matter for inducing every form. Semicolon. Here there is great virtue in its members, comma, were it not that she lacks heads. In other words, the problem is that she lacks heads, brains, heads, ideas. The problem is not the virtue. It's not the other words. It's not that she lacks. She has other virtues in its members. Were it not that she lacks heads. Next sentence, comma. Look at the duels, the combats which involved a few, comma, how the Italians are so superior in forces, comma, skills, and ingenuity, period. Like, you remember, this is the idea of the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance, the innovations of all these new weapons and innovations, all these new finance things. In other words, the new way of banking that came from Florence, the new ways of accounting, and they spread into the innovation of even Machiavelli, the Stato. This innovation that Machiavelli himself spreads into Europe and infects the rest of Europe, the European monarchies, and they alter themselves to embrace it. They embrace their finance. They embrace the Machiavelli's famous teaching about militia, his art of war. Again, this will really trying to defend the militias. This will go very far in in places like the Netherlands and other places that to rely on militia and training people. In other words, it will fuel the French Revolution's rise of new modern armies from conscript. It will fuel the new model army, the reformers, and the creation of the new model army in England during the English Civil War. In other words, all these innovations of things will the Italians innovated, and they will spread. The Italians' innovations of new techniques and new devices will go and spread, and they will they're the place of art, the place of creativity. The Italians were innovative, creative. So therefore, this is not, in other words, we don't lack the resources, he says, skill and ingenuity, right? But when it comes to armies, they do not compare. In other words, our armies suck. We have come up with devices and things like this, our banks and our system, our lighters, our letters, our art and this, but our arms, in other words, the arms, they don't compare. For Spanish and French arms are far superior. And hell, even the German arms are far superior. So he says that they do not compare. Next sentence. And it all proceeds from the weakness of the heads. Semicolon. For those who know are not obeyed, which, with everyone seeming to know, there has been no one until now who knows to raise himself through virtue and fortune, so that others may cede to him. Okay, who is this person? In other words, it's Machiavelli himself, because he knows about armies. He helped change the Florentine army. He was trying to. He was in the process of doing this, of really providing for the real Florentine army when everything collapsed, when the fortune failed and the regime collapsed, and he was thrown out of office and then tortured. Right, again, therefore, and then forced to go in internal exile for a long time, and writes Prince because of this. In other words, fortune denied him the opportunity to do this. And only maybe he can encourage the Florentine, the Medici, the Medici Prince, the Lorenzo, or whoever, whatever Medici, maybe even the Pope, if you can convince Leo, to go do great enterprises. Right? This idea. Take his advice. Be the second mind. Remember, be the second mind, and see me, the great mind, and I will be your great. I will help you. In other words, that's why that double play on that thing. That's why a chapter on secretaries is very interesting, because at one level it seems he wants you to think that you can do that middle option, but really you're not. You have to do one of the first and the third, right? But let's go back here, right? Let's go look at this line here, and he's right there. This is at page middle thing of 153. He goes about the Italians. He talked about not enough heads, right? They obey, and everyone knows. There have been no one to now who knew how to raise himself up through virtue and fortune, so that others will cede him. Those you don't virtue and fortune, and to be able to raise up through fortune and virtue both, so that others will follow him, like surrender to him, cede to him. Period. From this arises that so many times, in so many wars raged in the past 20 years, whenever there had been an army which has been wholly Italian, it has always proved to be bad. And of these is the testimony first of Tero, then of Essendo, of Capua, of Genoa, of Velella, of Bologna, of Messi. Now, De Alvarez has footnotes here, and I think the footnotes are useful. He goes footnote number 9, the River Tara, in which the Battle of Fermo in July 5th, 1490 was fought between the French and Italians. Charles VIII was returning to France in retreat from Naples. A blunder by the Italians prevented him from using their superior forces, permitted the French to escape. Okay, that's it. So therefore they didn't use, they blundered, and they allowed instead of being able to destroy him, he escaped in there. He was forced to retreat from Naples, and then number 10, Alexandria is the city of in Piedmont, having crossed the western invasion route. It is taken by Louis the XII in 1499. So Louis 1499 takes it and is able to, in other words, he takes it. His Italian army is defeated there. Capua was the last city in the Kingdom of Naples to hold out against the French. It was stormed and cruelly sacked by the French in Cesare Borgia on July 1501. And then 12, footnote, Genoa rebelled against French rule in 507, overthrowing the oligarchy, and was immediately put down by Louis XII without any difficulty. So those are the references, those are the notes he talks about. And then Marsiglia, Bologna, Olividi. Now 15 is, what is 15? 15 is, 15 is, okay, the French chased out, 14 is Bertovini. In other words, the French chased out Julius II out of Bologna and restored the Bertovini on May 21st, 1501, so therefore the Italian arms. And then the 15th, footnote 15, in 1503, a new war broke out in France on Venice. One side, the Holy League, the Pope, the Emperor of Spain, and Milan on the other. Medici was burned, and the armies of the Holy League advanced on Venice, right? So therefore, those are the examples that he gives about and every single one of those Italian arms cocked up. The Italians had not learned warfare. Okay. Machiavelli then turns next paragraph. And if then your illustrious house wishes to follow these excellent men, those other ones, right, who redeem their provinces, it is necessary before all else, as a true foundation of every enterprise, to prove oneself with one's own arms. In other words, above all else, as the true foundation of every enterprise, to provide oneself with one's own arms, for one cannot have a more faithful or more truer or better soldiers. In other words, the Italian soldiers are going to be truer, more faithful, and better. And although every one of them may be good, as one body they will become better when they see that they are commanded by their prince, and are honored and kept and provided for by him. In other words, the prince provides for his army. In other words, the prince takes care of it, he provides for me. They're not mercenary captains, they're not being paid by this prince and that prince and that prince, and the princes don't really care about them, they're small. In other words, you need to build an army. You're going to be a prince, you're going to conquer this thing, and you're going to do this. You need to create a big army. And that big army is going to have to be provided by you. You have to have your resources and do this. They have to be what? They are honored and kept and provided by him. It is necessary, therefore, to prepare for oneself these arms, so that with Italian virtue, one can defend oneself against external powers, against the French, the Emperor, and the Spanish. And the Turk, too. You need to be able to defend yourself against all the major powers here. Okay? And that you're going to have to be able to have enough. The Italian has virtue. They have the virtue. The soldiers are good. They have virtue. They just lack a head. They lack a center. And they're disunited. You need a united thing. that the army is united in that sense, right? Next paragraph. And although the Swiss and the Spanish infantry are esteemed as terrible, nevertheless both of them have defects, where a third order could not only oppose but be confident of surpassing them, for the Spanish are not able to withstand horse, and the Swiss have the fear of infantry, where the latter are confronted in combat by men as obstinate as theirs. In other words, when they have more infantry, the Swiss have fear of infantry when confronted in combat by men as obstinate as their men. So the Spanish infantry cannot handle horse. The Swiss can, but they can't handle infantry that is fierce and as hard as obstinate as they are. Okay, because they're where it has been said, and we'll see by experience, that the Spanish are not able to withstand the French cavalry, and that the Swiss are routed by the Spanish infantry. And period. Okay. In other words, what? That the Swiss are Spanish infantry can rout the Swiss, but the Spanish are not able to withstand the French cavalry. Okay. And next sentence, he goes, and although the latter has not been fully confirmed by experience, yet an indication of it was seen that day at Rivera. This is the battle where, Julius Rivera is okay, this is, hold on, I gotta talk about this. So this is actually important. Rivera is that moment where this is in chapter 13, note 3. Let's do this. Sorry, I'm going to go here and do it. The Battle of Ravenna, this is on page 85. He goes, the Battle of Ravenna is described as one of the most terrible, more terrible than any others in the memory of man. It was in short the first great battle of modern times. This is truly Life and Times of Machiavelli. The French won the great victory, but lost their brilliant young commander, Guichen de France. And then, as Machiavelli says, the whole world came against them. The Swiss, the Emperor, and England allied themselves with the Holy League. The French were driven out of Italy at the Battle of Novara in 1513. Now, this is again talked about in Discourses 2, chapter 16 and 17, and book 3, chapter 10, and the end. This is why Ravenna is that moment where everything lost hope, that they won the battle, but their commander was destroyed and everything collapsed because of that. It reminds me of people of Shiloh, what happened at Shiloh. The end of the first day, the Confederates won, but their commander was killed, and everything collapses. The next day, a new army pops in that overnight. A new army comes, so that not only is there the next morning their commander is disunited, the Confederates are disunited by the squabbling of who's going to succeed, but then there's a whole nother Union army that just shows up, a fresh one, and that they're outnumbered, so they retreat. Right, that's Shiloh. So Rivera is like the kind of moment in that what was achieved as a victory. The French achieved victory, but their commander is killed, and everything collapses from that point on, and they are forced to leave that. Right. So there's that day at Rivera when the Spanish infantry were faced by the German battalions, who followed the same order as the Swiss do, where the Spanish, with their agile bodies and the aid of their bucklers, entered between and under their pikes and safely attacked them without the Germans having any remedy. And if there had not been cavalry which charged the Spanish, the latter would have annihilated all of the Germans. That's why the Spanish infantry would have annihilated all the German. But if this infantry did not, the French cavalry did not charge, it would have been a complete disaster. Knowing the defects of both of these infantries, one can order anew one which will resist horse, and which will not fear infantry. And this will be done by the kind of arms adopted and by the alteration of the order. In other words, this is footnote 19. The alteration of the order. It must be emphasized that the alteration of order is the change of the whole constitutional order of the way of life. Most translators, however, seem to understand this phrase having to do only with the change of battle tactics. In other words, this is not only about battle tactics, change of battle. It's about the whole regime. The whole regime has to change. The whole way of life has to change. In other words, you have to change the way of life, because you can no longer just rely on concorde and the soft militia. You have to create militias. You have to trust the people. You have to build an army. You have to be arms infantry soldiers. The concorde, remember what he says about the Italian cities, because they did not respect war, they relied on mercenaries. And mercenaries, because they cannot really, you can't gain fame with small size units. You can't build big infantry units. In other words, you can't create a fame of a mercenary group. Mercenary groups are small size battalions at best, and you can't win much fame with men, an infantry unit that size. Whereas a cavalry unit, you can. So therefore, the mercenaries favored cavalry rather than infantry, and that therefore this is the problem, right? This is the mercenary arms, that there was not enough infantry to put all these Italian armies together, and there's more horse than there were. Now that's good to crush Spanish, but it's not good to crush the French or the Swiss, right? And then that's the whole point here, the Germans, in that sense. Now let's go back to what he says here. And these are among those things which a newly ordered give reputation and greatness to a prince. The army, organizing the army, order. Again, this is why his Machiavelli's Art of War, his dialogue. Now this is interesting. The dialogue that he writes about the arts of war is, maybe interesting in that sense. That this is why the prince ought to pay attention to war and discuss war. And remember, it's so funny that how he describes that in that chapter about the prince who ought to do that. The last chapter in 17, right? About the prince should always focus himself on war, right? Focus on war, focus on that learning, always being a talker and always being an enabler, right? Always trying to figure out things. That again is what happens if you read the Art of War. It's dialogue between young men talking about these things, where the Roman arms, the advocate of Roman arms and the advocate of criticizing Roman arms, new arms are mentioned. So therefore, this is, and it's also very interesting that Roman arms are not the great captain of Rome, Romulus, is not mentioned as the example here in that sense. So there's not going to be a return to Roman arms for some reason. But in other words, some people would argue that this is a kind of, he wants us to return to Rome, Roman situation. Look at the Roman greatness, return to Rome. But no, he conspicuously leaves Romulus out of his list in 26. Conspicuously leaves him out. Doesn't mention him. Therefore, he is silent about the Roman example. Except he gives that quote from Livy, right? So the quote from Livy is a quote to an account of the great Rome, right? And it's a quote from book. What is that quote from Livy? It's book 9 of the first book 9 of Livy. So that it's part of the first 10. It's at Republican Rome. It is the height of the Republican Rome before we get to the Caesars. So it's the height of the Republican Rome, because starting with book 2, we get the Republic, right? Of Livy's history. So now Now this leads us to, therefore, he says, of those great things newly ordered, gives reputations and greatness to a new prince. So a new prince, the situation is such that the order is situation, this is built for a new prince to take virtue of. And this leads us to our last paragraph. One ought not, this is on 54, this bottom page, the whole thing ends there. One ought not then let this occasion pass, so that Italy, after so much time, might see the one who is her redeemer, period. So she finds her redeemer. Next sentence. Nor can I express that with what love he would be received in all these provinces, which had suffered by these foreign floods, semicolon, with what thirst for vengeance, with what obstinate faith, what piety, with what tears, spirit. So notice this. Notice these things that he's saying. He says, and he has these wonderful lists of three things that, good, those things that, blah, 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 good. Now he says this wonderful thing. He has this, what he says, in other words, he has suffered what? The province have suffered by foreign floods, and what thirst for vengeance, with what obstinate faith, with what piety, and with what tears. What doors would, next sentence, what doors would be shut against him? What people would deny him obedience? What envy would oppose him? In other words, a series of questions are presented. After he says, let's think this is a very constructive sentence here. He goes, that not the occasion pass, nor can I express what love he would be revealed by the provinces, because what they have for these things, because they with what thirst for vengeance they have, with obstinate faith, with what piety, with what tears, what doors would be shut against him, what people would deny obedience, what envy would oppose him, what Italian would deny him homage. So there's the four here things. Doors that should be shut. People deny obedience. Envy that would oppose. And deny him homage. Who would deny him homage? What Italian would deny him homage? This is interesting. To everyone, this barbarian domination stinks. So to everyone, this domination stinks. Let your industrial house, then, take up this task with that spirit and hope with which just enterprises are taken up. Semicolon. In other words, take up this enterprise. It's a just enterprise, right? And that beneath your ensign, your flag, your banner, this fatherland, patria, this fatherland may be ennobled, and under your auspices, what Petrarca, the great poet, the great Italian poet, may prove to be true. And this is the quote. He quotes Petrarca verbatim. Italian virtue against fury will take arm and make the battle short, for their ancient valor, in Italian hearts is not yet dead. This is 20. This is from the canto. I think it's 78. CXXVIII. Lines 93 to 96. Virtu contola e fura pretendra elam elfita el combate corto. Cia ancino vala nel interia con non en amor morto. Italian honor is not the Italian thing is not yet dead. Now, not yet dead. This is like a line, and even in the Polish national anthem. No, the Polish anthem talks about that not yet dead. This is the same thing. This line. The Poles had the same Dąbrowski's March. This idea for the recovery of the fatherland, this recovery of the lost the lost land, the lost patria in that sense. That Poland was lost, partitioned, at the turn of the end of the 18th century. 18th century got chopped up by the major powers of the region. Prussia, Russia, and the Austro-Hungary, the Holy Roman Empire time. This is before Napoleon ended it, right? So this idea that the homeland was lost, this idea of patria, recovering one's homeland, patria, a patriot, a patria, the recovery of the homeland, the fatherland. And this ends the Machiavelli's Prince. Again, if you have any questions about the Prince, about this chapter, or the Prince in general, it has been nice going over this with you guys. I hope you like it. I hope people will benefit from this. I'm going to have to put this all together in a better, a linked thing. Again, it's been nice to do this, and the question is what I'll do next. I'm looking. It's going to be a coin flip. It's going to probably be. I probably will do Art of War by not Machiavelli but Sun Tzu, only because it's a nice short thing. It's like a little thing I can do. I have to think about it, and then I will probably do Thucydides' Peloponnesian War, using the famous landmark edition of Thucydides. And I'm thinking about that, so we'll see. Maybe I won't. Maybe I want to eventually do Aristotle's Politics. I always wanted to do this. You can find, I have done a course on Machiavelli Politics. It's available at archive.org. You can archive.org. You can probably find it in the recordings. The class was recorded, and we put it there. It's kind of so-so recording of the whole series of discussions. And that, again, if you'd like what we've done, please check it. Please do it. Share it with a friend. Please, if you want to follow me on social, if you want to get more of these, you can subscribe. Please, if you want to follow me on social media, check out the stuff below. And nice seeing you. Have a good day.